This automotive opera with side exit exhausts is the last V12 Ferrari to win at Le Mans. But it wasn't the factory that took this prancing horse endurance racing. This is the time the British and the French built a better Ferrari than the Italians. If this film pros your drive and makes you think about swapping your Facel Vega for a Ferrari, then why not head over to HagertyMarketplace.com. You can auction for free and keep 100% of the sale price. To find out more, just click on the playful little link in the whimsical description down below.
As a young children, and I've always been fanatic of sports car, and particularly Ferrari and Le Mans race. And it have always been my dream to be able to race at Le Mans, and I look to several opportunities buying a P3 or a 250 GTO. But when I test the car and I look to the price which was requested at that time was in 2000 around 7 million. I say maybe a better investment will be to develop a 550 and race on my own car.
That was Frédéric Dor of the Care Racing Development Team, who was the driving force behind the 550 Prodrive. But why was it left to a Frenchman and a British company to make the car? Well, although today we are getting used to seeing factory Ferraris racing at Le Mans with the 499Ps sweeping all before it, for a long time prior to that, the Scuderia focused pretty much entirely on F1. Ferrari really left it to independent teams and manufacturers like Dallara and Michelotto to fly the flag for them in endurance racing, with cars like this, the 333 SP. This and the F40 GT were the direct predecessors to the 550 Prodrive, but although not factory built, they were at least made in Italy, not Banbury, England. If you don't know who Prodrive are, they're the people that built all the blue and yellow Subarus, like this. Prodrive became involved when Frédéric Dor, who had rallied with them, took them an earlier Italian-built 550 race car called the Millennio. It had shown some promise, but he asked if it could be made more reliable. Prodrive said there was simply too much work to do, and it would be much better to start with a clean sheet of paper. We'll come back to this chap's involvement in a bit. In just 15 weeks in 2001, Prodrive set about creating this masterpiece. George Howard Chappell was the technical director, and Martin Ogilvy brought all his Lotus experience to bear as chief designer, while Peter Stevens was also drafted in to help. Many of the people involved back then now work for Venture Engineering, who are running this car today. And they all attest that they were helped by the fact the 550 had the right stuff from the outset.
The fundamentals of the road car are still in here. That's what made Prodrive take on the challenge in the first place. So it got double wishbones all round. It had Coney dampers in period. It's still on Coney dampers now, just two-way adjustable. So not terribly sensitive. There's a little bit of push at the front, which is quite nice. The steering's so light, in fact, bumpy over there. The early cars didn't have power assisted steering. They didn't have aircon either. And the team said, well, you get one or the other. So they went for power steering. They did get aircon eventually too, but I mean, it's physical enough as it is. So this has 600 brake horsepower, 553 pound-feet of torque. The initial cars had 5.8-litre engines, up from 5.5. And then this had
the The F133A engine is a 65-degree V12 with 4 valves per cylinder. Regulations stipulated that the road car's aluminium block and head castings had to remain, and there was a mandatory air restrictor. But otherwise, the rules were fairly free. The road car's titanium conrods were used, but the variable intake system was swapped for a fixed, all-carbon fibre version that saved 20 kilos from on high. They were helped by the fact that the engine that came out of the road car was fundamentally so good. The crankshaft was of such good quality they could use it in this engine. Similarly, the geometry was ideal for turning the road car engine into a race engine. Some of the biggest changes, things like this, came from the fact they wanted to move the engine down and further back in the chassis. The road car's cockpit dimensions had to be retained, but chamfering the cylinder heads like this and redesigning the dry sump system meant a better centre of gravity could be achieved. However, this move did present a problem for the steering column, which had previously run underneath, but now had to go between the cam belts and the block. There were two specs of engine. This race engine, and then later on an Evo version which had lower compression pistons and was meant to be slightly cheaper to run for customers. However, there was also one third iteration of the engine, Bonfire Billy, so named because the block was taken from a fire-damaged car, and that was used for qualifying with particularly trick parts inside. If you see it, well, you'll know because it has black cam covers instead of red. The V12 wasn't the only part of the car with more than one variant either, because the FIA GT Championship and ACO and American Le Mans Series had different regulations. Brakes, for example, were sometimes steel, sometimes carbon. Originally they had to have two different gearboxes for this, so there was actually an H-pattern version. However, this is obviously the sequential gearbox all the way back there. And this little LED here is part of an optical system for the flat shift. And being able to change up without lifting off the throttle is something to be savoured.
It's so fun! Having a long way here! Imagine being going around the long track! Wow! The throttle is so sharp! It's like you're touching a cut, yelping almost in pain.
While just as satisfying as the upshifts, the downshifts do require the use of the clutch and therefore some heel and toe, which takes considerably more thinking.
You get that heel and toe right, it's so you see it's so low in here, and yet actually it's quite light, it's quite an airy cabin. And you've still got the sort of architecture of the cabin in here as well, which is lovely. Compared to a modern car with its sort of bewildering array of screens, this has just got that little strip down there. If you jumped out of a Rouge 550 and into this, you'd sort of, it'd be like going from a full suitcase to an empty one.
Not surprising really, as it weighs just 1,100 kilos or 2,425 pounds, which is less than 2/3 of the weight of the rather special road car that this once was.
I love that this very car was Frédéric Dor's road car for so long, and then in retirement it went racing.
The first two chassis were made from cars bought from a dealership on the King's Road in London, but chassis 3 had much more provenance.
First season 2001 was successful, and we decided to convert a third car to go at Le Mans in 2002.
It raced at Le Mans no less than 5 times, the most of any Ferrari in history, but it also had victories everywhere from Laguna Seca and Road Atlanta to Spa and Silverstone. Originally in 2002, it was painted exactly the same vivid red as Michael Schumacher's F1 car, but then in 2003 it had this unusual but rather wonderful livery. Why the mountains? Well, that's all to do with this chap, Luc Alphand, who is something of a sporting polymath and a bit of a personal hero, because before he became a racing driver, he was a ski racer, winning the Downhill World Cup 3 times in the 90s. After he raced at Le Mans, he went on to win the Dakar in 2006. Such an overachiever. And talking of liveries and sponsors, Hugh Chambers, the commercial director at Prodrive, was very proud that the 550 helped introduce a particular brand of apparel to the four-wheeled world. Up to that point, Alpine stars had only really been involved with motorbikes, but Prodrive, with this and the BAR Honda F1 team and the World Rally team, brought them into the world of cars. And perhaps the most visible person in Alpine Star's kit was a certain Scottish rally driver.
He's been very satisfactory in practice. In his open face, slightly rally-looking helmet, Colin McRae sets off in car number 65.
I was a good friend of Colin. We raced for many seasons together in Prodrive, and he asked us if he could race at Le Mans, and of course David and I were very enthusiastic offer him the possibility to have this experience.
After racing Chassis 3 at Le Mans, McRae said that it was the hardest time he'd ever had behind the wheel of a car. Nonetheless, at the end of the 2004 race, he found himself on the third step of the podium with Darren Turner and Rickard Rydell. But he wasn't the fastest driver to pilot the 550 Prodrive. That was
Thomas Enghe. The most crazy driver is Thomas Enghe, yes.
How was it driving this again around the circuit?
Every time you sit in this car, it's an incredible experience, especially around this circuit where you have some really high-speed corners. It's pretty wide. There are bumps, so it's interesting. It's entertaining, I have to say.
It's really bumpy through there, isn't it?
Not only for spectators, but also for the driver, because you have to correct it all the time. But now it's such an amazing noise, and the power and the torque of this car, it's always blast.
Yeah. Enghe was not only part of the trio that took a GTS class victory at Le Mans in 2003, the first for a Ferrari in 22 years, he also took 3 successive pole positions in the 550 at Le Mans, starting with this very chassis in 2002.
Every time you go for qualifying, you have low fuel, you have new tires, soft tires most of the time. I still remember qualifying tires 2002, 3, 4. 4 was the last time we had qualifying tires available for Le Mans, and that was tire only for 1 lap. It was so soft that the lap times were about 3 seconds faster than anything else. So at that time it's like an incredible feeling, because you have the G-forces, you have the speed, and if you put the lap together, it's amazing.
Where was this car strong? Where was it weak in the lap around Le Mans?
I think the car was a little bit weak in front, in high-speed corners. We had a little issue with understeer, but generally it was fast on a straight. So the car had huge power, and especially the aero package, what we had in Le Mans, we had always like low downforce, really top speed. I remember in 2002 when we came first time to Le Mans with this car, we fight against the factory Corvettes, and we were about 30 k's faster on the top speed. We were faster than some of the LMP2 cars. So most of the LMP2 cars at that time, that was still the time without air restrictors, without restricting the cars all around. Everybody produced the best what they can, and we were doing 320, 325 k's per hour on the top speed in Mulsanne Straight, while the Corvettes were doing 290s, you know, barely.
Which must have been quite a shock to the Corvette team, I imagine. Let's ask Ollie Gavin.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt. They had a straight line speed advantage. And that was something that we soon figured out that we really couldn't battle. You know, we had to find the strengths in our car and where we could really maximise our performance. And, you know, so, yes, we recognised that in a straight pace fight that we weren't ever going to be able to beat them. But our reliability was titanic, and our car was so strong and so well built that we really relied on being consistent and really relied on us being smart. And, you know, being teamed with Ron and Johnny for that first year that I was there with Corvette Racing in the C5R was, you know, it was magic. It was fantastic, brilliant to be able to go there for my first year with that team and come away with a victory. But I think if that 550 had been reliable, I think it would have been a little bit of a different story.
Yeah. There's a tyre offset as well.
First year? Yeah. So in 2002 and 2003, the Corvette C5R was on the Goodyear, and the 550 was on the Michelin. And of all of the things that we ever tried and with development and work with C5, C6, C7, C8 even, the biggest step in performance that we ever made was going from the Goodyear to the Michelin. And so we were, for those first 2 years in 2002 and 2003, pretty much fighting with one arm tied behind our backs. And I'm sure Thomas will say it was all about, you know, their amazing performance and his amazing performance and how fast he was and brilliantly quick and all this. But that was a pretty big card that they played. And when we got back to Le Mans in 2004, on the Michelin tyre, all of a sudden, you know, the speed differential was, yeah, they maybe had a little bit more straight line speed still, but our performance in the corners and in braking in particular was amazing.
Yeah. Any memories of Thomas?
Oh, plenty of memories of Thomas. I mean, Thomas, what a character, what a guy. He was just, he is one of motorsport's real characters and somebody that you want to have in the sports because, you know, he was so utterly focused on one lap, outright speed. And, you know, it's almost like George Howard Chapel from Prodrive would just sort of like plug him in the car and go, right, Thomas, pole, now, do it. And he would just leave the pit lane and he would only have one thing in his mind. You know, however he did it, he would just be looking for that pole position. But Thomas is one of these guys that kind of like in every sportsman and you know, that's been successful, they're successful because they really understand how to operate in the margins, in the grey areas and pushing the boundaries all the time and really pushing up against, you know, the officials or track limits or bits of the racetrack you can use or can't use. Well, Thomas was all over that stuff. I mean, he just was the whole time looking for that extra edge where he could find it, and that drove everybody on to learn, you know, whether it was, you know, rivals or teammates or, you know, I remember talking to some of his teammates after one particular qualifying session there at Le Mans, and they were going, yeah, we were overlooking, you know, Thomas's data, and, you know, he was quick in through sort of Tetra Rouge and then coming down into Mulsanne corner, he was very good. But then at the last chicane, coming through the 4 chicanes there to finish the lap, the speed trace, it didn't drop, he just drove straight across the chicane. And like, oh, that's how he got pole position, you know. But it was just, he did it in the end of the session. It was dark. It was nearly midnight. You know, we were sat back in the pit box, you know, looking at the timing screens, thinking, yeah, okay, we're on pole, we're looking good. Oh no, we're not. Thomas is on pole. Oh, great.
And what are Thomas's memories of Ollie?
So with Ollie, it was always square and fair and square, how you say. He was tall guy, so I always, you know, have to be, otherwise he would beat me up. But no, Ollie, shame I did not race together with Ollie in one car, because he was always a very, very nice guy. So I have great memories with him. We never had, maybe we had some small scrubbing, you know, scrubbing, but nothing serious, I guess. The only thing what I remember, what I've been told from the Corvette drivers at that time, that every time I came into their mirrors or behind them, they have been told by their engineer, watch out, there is anger behind you, you better behave, you know. Because they knew I'm gonna go for any gap possible. I was not dirty driver or anything, but I was pretty hard, and I think I made respect for the other drivers, and also they were respecting me quite a lot. So that was fair, and I enjoyed.
I think it's fair to say Ollie enjoyed racing against Thomas too, particularly if it was wheel to wheel.
You know, the times that we're racing side by side against the 550, just the noise of our V8, 7-litre V8 up against the Ferrari 550 and screaming away, and that sort of mixture of sound, you know, you just can't ever really...
And you could actually hear.
Yeah, you could hear them, and you can hear the shifts, and you can hear everything.
I'm surprised, because it's such a lot, but you still think it's like a Corvette. Can you actually hear kind of the
it was remarkable how you know, the C5-R was an extremely loud car, and, you know, 7 litres, and the exhaust pipe was right there, just sort of below, next to your bum, really. And so you would be up alongside a car, you would be hearing the reflection of your exhaust, but then also the Ferrari 550's exhaust, and that noise that it was making. It was so shrill, but so sort of sharp, and you know, it was that sort of two mixtures of the grunt of the V8 and that Ferrari sort of like scream, I suppose. And it was a magical time, and you know, it set it all up so brilliantly, racing against that Ferrari in 2, 3 and 4, and then it went on to being us racing against the Aston Martin in 5, 6, 7, 8, even into 9, you know, and onwards. You know, it was a brilliant period, and the cars were magic to drive.
Imagine what it must have been like with the base of the Corvette, and then the whale, the soprano of this. It's much more physical than the 458 that I drove. Not as easy to drive, but wow, what a noise, what a sound. A minute to here, now we're under here, so much torque that makes it actually easier to drive, more forgiving to that extent. Over the bumps. You can kind of grab it by the scruff, it's just the way you haven't got huge amounts of lock to play with. What a race car to have. You can just imagine yourself going historic racing in this now. It would be brilliant.
Just 12 of these magnificent cars were built, including 2 development and test cars. Yet they racked up 343 races, 8 international championship wins, 60 pole positions, 69 race victories, and they finished on the podium in 45% of their races. Despite an impressive comparative test at Fiorano with Luca Badoa behind the wheel, the factory chose to initially stick with Rydell Technica and then moved on to N Technology for its own, much less successful, customer 550 and 575 GTC efforts. These days, the Ferrari factory is happy to recognise the importance of these independent 550 Prodrives because they've given it full Classic A certification. Quite right too, because it really is very, very special.
It might have been built by the Brits, it might be painted blue, but this is a proper Ferrari.